Okay, guys, good afternoon. My name is Andreas Zingerle, and I will start with the first lecture today. How open is the future? And I want to start by giving an introduction to the free Libre open source technologies. And this is my website also, where you can see more of my projects. The content of this lecture is a basic definition about free Libre open source, what it is, why it is, and how can you get started with it. Then I also want to show you some organizations and a couple of creative examples to get you maybe inspired what you can do with it. And then I want to give you a quick run through the tools that we will implement over the next weeks, and where you will also get workshops for each tool. So we will look at how to manage a wiki, how to use Jitsi for video conferencing, then Hub's Mozilla as a 3D environment to create rooms and present your projects. Then OBS as a broadcasting and streaming software, and CryptPad for writing collaboratively on documents, spreadsheets, or presentations. And we will end with a Q&A that we will facilitate through the chat, so you can write your questions there, and I will then go through and answer some of them. So my name is Andreas Zingerle. I'm based in Bergen, and I'm a designer, lecturer, and researcher. I work with my wife Linda Kronman as the Kairos Art and Research Collective for the last 10 years. I studied at the University of Art and Design in Linz in Austria. I did several Erasmus exchange. One was to the Aalto University in Helsinki, to the Media Lab, and then I also did other exchanges to the Bilgi University in Istanbul, or also to the University of Bergen here. My main research interest is in interactive narratives, in speculative fiction. I also did a project on e-waste and Internet of Things. Most recently, I was working on smart cities. And I'm very interested in the free and Libre open source communities and digital art and emerging forms of human-computer interaction. That was also the studies that I did during my master's at a program called Interface Cultures in Linz. So we were focusing on digital art, media art, and new forms, what are different and new approaches to human-computer interaction. Together with the Kairos Collective, we did several artist-in-residence programs, and during these programs we also did research in these respective countries. So we were for several years in the Netherlands or in South Korea, and did short-time residencies in China, in Beijing, and in Accra and Kumasi in Ghana in West Africa. So one name of my presentation is How Open is the Future, and I will go with you through and show you that it is in the end our social responsibility to shape the present and also the future, and we are in charge to answer these questions mainly. So when we look at related problems, then my question to you is, would you accept tools that have these following rules? So you are forbidden to modify a paperclip, for example, or it is forbidden to let other people use your hammer, or it is forbidden to use this hammer for removing nails. You are just allowed to use the hammer for hammering nails into a wall, but not to do the opposite, for removing them. Or you are not allowed to tell other people what is written in a book that you were reading. So why do we accept these rules with soft and hardware when they are so peculiar to tools that we use in the real world, in the physical world? Because with soft and hardware, you're forbidden to copy it. It's forbidden to modify the software or to reverse engineer it and to figure out how the program code is working actually. Or also often it is forbidden to use it in certain circumstances, or there are regional lockouts that you can just use certain hardware in certain countries, so on. So there are different software packages that I want to go through with you. There is on the one hand the proprietary software that has a closed source. So that means that you cannot look at the program code. You can just open the program and use it. So this is mostly the commercial programs that you also have to pay for. Then there are certain shareware programs. So there you have a trial version for a certain amount of days, and after that this trial period is over and you have to pay to get the full version. Then there is Adware, which is with ads, with advertisement, and mostly small programs that are for free, but they run ads. Then there is freeware that is also for free, as it says, but often it's also spyware. So they try to, check and gather data, like what is your operating system, what is your screen resolution, and try somehow do a user study of who is using this program for how long and what are what is the framework of this user in a way. And then there is the free and open source software, where free is always considered the freedom in it, not as in free beer. So then one quote from Richard Stallman, where we will also soon view a video on him. The most fundamental way of helping other people is to teach people how to do things better, or how to better their lives. For people who use computers, this means sharing the recipes you use on your computer. In other words, the program that you run. We will soon get back to this quote also in a video where he's talking more in detail about it and explaining it. So to quickly answer some questions, what is considered open source? So in production and development, open source is a philosophy, a methodology that promotes the free redistribution and access to a product design or ideas and the implementation details. It's open as in free, and it's not closed. You have free access to it. You are able to reuse it and also to change it. And it's open to use in any place and for everyone. The benefits of open source, besides the ones that I mentioned already, the source code is available. You can see how the program is written, or you can see into the recipe and not just get the final product. So for some people it's very interesting to read the source code, to try to understand it and to learn from it. You also don't have to reinvent the wheel. If you want to make something similar, you have a base that you can start from, and on top of this base you can build up. So you can reuse the recipes, the code from other people. Free as in freedom. You are not a slave to the product. It does not depend on a vendor. Most often it's distributed online. So you can choose additional support. You can fix bugs and adapt to change in requirements, as well as also to the technology. And the quality and the custom, it's better to customize also, because you can change it, you can customize it to your needs. And of course, also the costs are a point. There are also, where there is light, there is some shadow also. So often the programs are not so shiny from its design, from its usability, and it's not so straightforward to use it. Often they require a certain learning curve to use it and also to get accustomed to it. Sometimes you have the incompatibility issues with software and hardware. The software quality is not widely transparent, and there are also no financial incentives. So for the developers or for the community, it's often like a side project that they are working on, and this can also mean that sometimes if the community is not very active, then these programs can take a very long time to develop. So it often depends on how rich is the community, how many people work there together in order to pursue the development of the product. So there are a lot of examples of open source software, and we will also have a more detailed look at many of them in the weeks to come. I'm sure you have all used Blender also, but there are several browsers like Firefox or Chromium, LibreOffice as a Word Office alternative, GIMP instead of Photoshop, and zip for compressing files. Then operating systems, you have Linux, of course, with all its different flavors. Then Android for your phones, or Sailfish also. There is a own app store called F-Droid that focuses on open source apps that you can use on your Android devices. So I'm sure everyone is accustomed with Linux, and I hope you have all used them. And also Android is a free operating system that is mainly developed by Google that releases its code. So very related concepts are open standards, open education, then open content licenses such as Creative Commons. I'm sure you have heard about it in relation to image rights or also to audio files, video files. Creative Commons give a certain license that you're allowed to reuse it, to modify it, also sometimes to use it in a commercial purpose or just as a free distribution, as long as you name the authors of the original files. Then open hardware, for example, the Arduino or Raspberry Pi platforms, open innovation, open culture, and open data initiatives that you can see over the different city websites also. Often they share the open data from to the public that a city is accumulating. And there is also open access for scientific publications. For example, here in Norway, most of the funded research, academic research, has to be published under an open access license. So it has to be freely available to the general public. So to answer some questions why the free Libre open source is good to use in education, as we had the social responsibility, there is a certain freedom and the user rights, and for students it's also a huge benefit to use freely available software without any costs or without the need to pirate any software. There are certain saving issues, of course. There are no costs to acquire the software. There is less administrative effort in terms of no licenses also that needs to be updated or managed. And it's also possible to study the internals of the software, how the code is working and so on. And also when you follow the development of open software and hardware, you see also this international online collaboration that is happening by becoming a member or a participant in this community. You realize this international community approach in terms of delivering, improving software and hardware, and to see how people work. That's the important part. So now I want to show one video from Richard Stallman, where he talks about free software and free society.
Free software is the first battle in the liberation of cyberspace. Who controls your computer? Is it you, or is it some big company that's really controlling it? Well, what is a computer? A computer is a universal machine. It will do any computation you want it to because you give it a program that says what the computation is that you want. So the computer only knows how to get out an instruction and do it, and get out another instruction and do it. The program has the instructions. It says what to do. So by writing the right program, you can make it do anything. Well, almost anything. So who gives the instructions to your computer? You might think it's obeying your instructions, when really it's obeying somebody else first, and you, only as much as that company wants it to, will let it listen to you. With software, there are two possibilities. Either the users control the program, or the program controls the users. It's inevitably one or the other. So in order for the users to control the program, they need the 4 essential freedoms. And that's the definition of free software. Free software respects the user's freedom and community. Now, we often call it Libre, using the French or Spanish word, pronounce it as you like. The point is, that's what we mean. We don't mean it's gratis. We're not talking about price. We're concerned with your freedom, and we sometimes say free/Libre to show that. So, freedom 0 is the freedom to run the program as you wish, for whatever purpose. Freedom 1 is the freedom to study the source code of the program and change it so it does the computing you want it to do. But what is the source code? Well, every program typically will have 2 forms. There's the form that you can read and you can understand if you know the programming language. That's the source. That's what programmers write and change. Then there's the executable, which is a bunch of numbers which even a programmer can't figure out. If all you get is the executable, it's a horrible pain in the neck to figure out what it does, and even harder to change it. So to give you the real possibility to study and change it, they've got to give you the source code. That's a requirement. Well, with those 2 freedoms, each user separately can make a copy and start changing it and make it do what she wants. That's individual control. But what if you're not a programmer? You look at the source code and you don't understand it. Individual control isn't enough. We also need collective control, which means any group of users are free to work together to adapt the program to what they want. Of course, in the group, some of them are programmers. They're the ones who actually write the changes, but they're doing it as part of the group for what the group wants. Of course, the group doesn't have to be everybody. So others can use it some other way. They're all free to do that. So collective control requires 2 more essential freedoms. Freedom 2 is the freedom to redistribute exact copies, to make the copies and then give them away or sell them when you wish. And freedom 3 is similar, but it's for your modified versions. You're free to make copies and then give them or sell them when you wish. So if you do have these freedoms, then it's free software. The users control the program. But if any of those freedoms is missing, then the users don't control the program. Instead, the program controls the users, and the developer controls the program. So that means this program is an instrument of unjust power for its developer over the users. That means the users don't have freedom. That's non-free proprietary software, which we got to get rid of. Well, when you've got proprietary software, what happens? Sometimes the program snoops on the user. Sometimes it tracks the user. Sometimes it restricts the user and stops users from doing what they want to do. You can see that the blue ray is your enemy. Sometimes the software remotely deletes books, as Amazon did with 1984. Sometimes the developer compels users to install a harmful upgrade by threatening to take away other functionality if it's not installed, as Sony did. And sometimes they can even forcibly change the software at a distance, as Microsoft can with Windows through the universal backdoor. So sometimes they even sabotage users, as Microsoft does when it tells the NSA about bugs in Windows so it can use them to attack people's computers. Well, what you get is basically, with proprietary software, the owner has power over the users, and takes advantage of this power, putting in those various malicious functionalities to hurt the users. Of course, they don't do this because they're sadists. They're doing it just for money, for greed. They have various ways that they can profit from having this power over users, which does not make it even the tiniest bit less evil. But they have no shame about it. They have conferences where they talk about the latest ways they can take advantage of users through the power they have. Basically, proprietary software, which is now from almost all the users of proprietary software, they're using proprietary malware. It's software for suckers. So how do you stop being the victim? Formerly, you had to stop using computers, but not anymore. Now you can come join us in the free world that we've built. In 1983, I announced I would develop a completely free software operating system called GNU. In 1992, we had it almost finished, but one piece was missing, the kernel. Linus Torvalds in that year freed his kernel Linux, which filled the last gap and gave us the first complete system you could run on a PC, GNU plus Linux. So, unfortunately, having freedom at one point doesn't guarantee you'll keep it. There are over 1,000 different variants of GNU/Linux. They're called distributions. A few of them are entirely free software. Most of them have non-free software added because they're maintained by people who aren't concerned about freedom. They'd rather add convenience at the cost of freedom. So you have to check which is a free distro. To keep your freedom sometimes requires a sacrifice, sometimes a big sacrifice, as at Lexington. Sometimes, but in our campaign, they tend to be little sacrifices. Anybody with a little bit of maturity can make these sacrifices. For instance, you want applications, but some of them are non-free. If you want freedom, you got to do without them. So there may be some inconveniences you have to suffer for your freedom's sake. Then many websites send non-free programs written in JavaScript to the user's browser. If you don't want to run non-free programs, you should install Libre.js, which keeps out non-free JavaScript. And sometimes servers will offer to do your computing. They say, send us all your data, obviously for suckers. Then the server does the computing and sends you back the results. But you're not supposed to think about what's happening because it's a cloud and you don't see what's going on. Well, you should look. It's software as a service as a software substitute, and it takes away control of your computing. So a large fraction of the world's web servers are running GNU/Linux and other free software. But I think the most important computers to put freedom in are your computers, not companies' web servers. They deserve freedom also. But above all, it's people that deserve freedom. So we need to advance. And to do that, we have to cross obstacles. One of them is there are big companies that make a lot of money by having control over users, and they don't want to let us advance. We have to overcome their opposition. Another is that the mainstream media don't talk about free software. They have a term that they use to bury these ethical issues. They say open source instead. Now, it talks about more or less the same programs, but with different ideas, where free software activists say, this is a matter of right and wrong. Users deserve freedom. We demand freedom. The people who say open source, they don't want to say that. So instead they say, let the users change the software and redistribute it, and they'll make the code better. They'll fix some bugs. It may be true, but it's a less important issue. If we want to keep our freedom, we've got to talk about freedom. So say free software, and you're helping us every time. Another obstacle is that lots of schools teach non-free software, which is basically like teaching the kids to smoke tobacco. It's implanting dependence, which is the opposite of what schools should do. A school should prepare citizens to live in a strong, capable, independent, cooperating, and free society, which means teaching free software in the school. But there's another reason to do that for education. Some kids want to become programmers. They're curious. They want to know how the programs work. Well, the one who's studying a free software can understand it. The one who's studying a non-free program can't learn anything because the knowledge in the non-free program is withheld, denied to the students. So to uphold the spirit of education, the school should make sure its programs are free. But there's an even more important reason. Schools should teach the spirit of goodwill, the habit of helping other people. So the class should say, if you bring a program to class, just as if you bring cookies to class, you've got to share it with everyone else. Can't keep it to yourself. You got to share the source code so other people can learn. So don't bring any proprietary software to this class. The school has to set a good example by following its own rule. It should bring only free software to class, except as a reverse engineering exercise. Another obstacle is there's hardware we don't know how to write free software for because they won't tell us how to use the hardware. That's shocking. They want to sell you the product and they won't tell you how to use it. They say, here's a non-free program you can use, run it and shut up. Don't bother us. Well, how do we find out how to run that hardware? With reverse engineering, you've got to study all those zeros and ones to figure out what they really do and write down how to use that hardware so someone else can write the free program to do it. It's hard work, but it can be done. If you want to make a big technical contribution, that's what you should do. Each new activity of life can bring with it new human rights that are necessary. And the human rights depend on each other. If you lose one, it becomes harder to maintain the others. So nowadays, computing is so important in society that the freedoms of free software are among the human rights that society must establish and protect. Thus, how to help? Well, you can write free software. You can organize groups to campaign and persuade schools and governments to move to free software. You can help other people when they have trouble using free software or help them install it. You can say free software and spread the philosophical ideas. Moving to free software is the first step in the liberation of cyberspace. But of course, we also use the internet. We need other freedoms there, like network neutrality and putting an end to surveillance of people in general.
Okay, so I think that gives a very good overview, and we can continue from here. So I want to show some examples, and one that I found very interesting also to follow and to see a constant development over the years is the Free Software and Open Source Foundation Africa. Because also when we have been traveling to West Africa in 2014, we saw a lot of architecture programs and a lot of students from different schools in Europe and in the States doing their projects in Africa. The village where we lived in, there were several projects done, mainly like housing projects that were designed, different designs that were tried out, and then for a certain time of 2, 3, 4 weeks, a class of students was there building a library, for example, or building a school and trying out different materials, different techniques, and therefore helped the small village society to improve in their daily lives. But on the other hand, we also saw that there is a digital divide, of course, and a library without any books or with no computers is also just another house in a way. So the digital divide can be bridged by using free software and in general by using open source, um, following the open source mentality. So adopting open source in its wider range, not just by looking at the technology, but also by seeing like what everything that can be open sourced. Also in the health sector, the sharing of health information, the can encourage the innovation and the research. But also, of course, it can narrow the effects of the techno-colonialism and like everything that can be done to make these communities free and act freely upon their decisions, and being not dependent on anyone gives them like yeah the encouragement they need. There is a need for technology, and often we can also see that uh, the the landline or internet infrastructure is very less developed. So they also make technological jumps and go straight to Wi-Fi in a way. So that's interesting observations. And the, as I said, it is very important that these local communities are empowered to be in control of uh, their technology, but also their hardware, so that they know how to repair things themselves and not have to, order delivery parts expensive from somewhere. So that they are also that they are in control of what they own and not slaves to foreign companies, or and that everything becomes a public property. Yeah, empowering of people to be self-reliant. There is also a video that I don't want to look at now, but it goes more into details. What are the obstacles and of the Open Source Foundation Africa, and what are they working on? It's definitely interesting to watch. Another project that deals with the opening, making certain sources available, trying to reverse engineer urban design choices, was done by Selena Savage and Gordon. And they have been publishing a book on unpleasant design, also known as hostile architecture. And I'm sure you know about the phenomenon, but I would also like to watch a short video with you about that. So by following a workshop by them, I also they opened up their eyes to me to look at my surrounding and the city where I live in a different way. They were able to show me the places that are designed by purpose to be a little bit unpleasant. As you have seen in the video also, the benches where you have they were not made properly so that you can, for example, sleep on the benches, also disallowing homeless people, for example, to sleep on the benches, or also just for yourself to lie down and have a nap. There are, in a way, designs that force you to use it in a certain way and in the way that is intended by the city. So in their book, they were collecting several of these examples. Also, the London bench is a very well-known example that it's a block of concrete where you cannot lie on it and it's just possible to somehow lean on it. Then there are other designs of, of like certain attachments to concrete blocks so that you cannot skateboard on them, or as we saw in the video, also these spikes that just make it impossible for people to sit down, or also spikes to get pigeons out of the way. So yeah, hostile architecture we know, and it's a relatively common practice. But what was their approach then was to try to reverse engineer it, to hack it, and to make it usable again, to empower the citizens of a city to use the the city the way that the citizens want to use it for. So in this workshop, we were looking at different trash bins, for example, where you have a certain ripper layout integrated in it so that it becomes impossible to put posters on it or stickers. And we came up with a design choice or a design proposal so that we can also then attach stickers and posters on these trash bins again. And in general, I found it very interesting to just walk through the city that I know quite well and see what are all these unpleasant designs. Then another project that I wanted to show to you because I also thought that it might become interesting in terms of visualizing your designs. There is a open source virtual reality, and we will briefly have a look at the main features of it.
What is OSVR? OSVR is the freedom to shape the future. It's open access for everyone to the next stage of technology, to a reality you can help create. OSVR is open source virtual reality. It's the open standard for the development of both software and hardware for virtual reality. What does that mean? Well, pretty much three things. First, it's open source, which means that all the hardware and software designs are completely open for anyone and everyone to develop on. Second, it's supported by some of the leading companies in the industry today, companies who are committed to promoting virtual reality and keeping it free and open for all. Finally, it's all about gaming. While the work done for OSVR can be used for pretty much everything, the main purpose of OSVR is creating the best and most immersive virtual gaming experience. However, there are many things that OSVR is not. For starters, OSVR is not controlled by a single or group of companies. The OSVR software license uses the Apache 2.0 license, the same license that Android is licensed on. To put it simply, the open platform Android is to smartphones as OSVR is to virtual reality. Further, OSVR is also not a standalone OS. At this time, OSVR runs on Linux, Android, and Windows. Finally, OSVR is not a competitor to existing HMDs like Oculus. In fact, OSVR was designed to work with all HMDs, and we hope that the work on OSVR will lead to even better VR devices in the future. Why OSVR? While we believe that virtual reality is an exciting platform for the future, it's still quite a ways away from a consumer product that everyone...
Okay, so I'm sorry if there was some sound missing from the beginning, but in the end, it's more about the visual experience also that you have through the projection mapping. A more practical example for you is also like a 3D projection mapping on architecture scaled models. So let's have a look at this commercial prototype where real estate projects are used.
Adhiraj, driven by passion, powered by belief. Imagine a magnificent structure with the finest global lifestyle amenities over multiple levels, which weave a sense of togetherness in Navi Mumbai's tallest residential facility. Welcome to the iconic towers, the neighborhood in the sky. So how tall is the iconic tower? The 55-floor structure stands at a massive 603 feet. Way above the Qutub Minar and even taller than the pyramid. The swivel structure is one of the most distinct features of the iconic tower. Each story has been designed around the alphabet H. Every 5 stories, the angle of this H has been rotated 90 degrees, creating open spaces at regular intervals. The podium is a distinguished feature of the iconic towers. Made into a revered space where one can walk out of their home into a gated community through landscaped gardens and tree-lined pathways. Oh yes, and it is absolutely a car-free zone. Cars enter the premises and go directly to the multi-level underground parking. The vertical mobility solution at the tower is designed with a sophisticated destination selection control technology. It is as easy as tapping the floor you want to go, and you are directed to the cab, which will take you there the fastest. It travels at a lightning speed of 4 meters per second, so that you don't waste your time inside the elevator. Welcome home. The apartments are curated around style, convenience, and a sense of spaciousness. All the apartments are 3 sides open. The cross ventilation in each apartment enhances breeziness. The swivel structure comprises 2 5-story pockets every 5 floors, so each tower has 10 sky lounges developed around different themes. It will have designated play areas for children, barbecue zones, and Japanese-style rock gardens, to name a few. Khargar's most iconic address, Iconic Tower.
So also in this example, we have seen that actually through the use of video mapping on like a scaled architecture model, the whole model more becomes actually an image video, an image movie showing the main features and guiding the visitor through the main features than actually just a model that needs a lot of extra explanation. So here we use some open source programs. Depending on which one you use, you have different video sources that you can then direct to certain areas of the 3D model and project then onto this surface. And also by projecting on a 3D model, you have already a certain depth and a very different experience than if you would project solely on a 2D surface. So one project that I want to quickly outline is called Behind the Smart World. It also goes a little bit in the direction of the IoT that you want to work with also. It was developed in the last years, and it started out by a residency in West Africa, where we looked at the Internet of Things, and actually where does this Internet and all the technology that we are using actually end up. And we visited one of the biggest recycling centers in West Africa. And I quickly want to give you a video that showcases like a 1 minute introduction in a way.
Recycling West Africa style. Consumer electronics smashed, sorted, and the valuable metals extracted. This is Agbogloshi, Accra, where technology goes to die.
For years now, we've been exporting most of our dirty industries overseas. And now it seems we're doing the same with the most dangerous junk that's left over from our consumer goods.
Environmentalists say this is the most toxic place on Earth. All types of electronic equipment, including computers, TVs, and freezers, are dismantled by young men and children.
There are international laws banning the export of electronic waste, but they can be sidestepped by labelling shipments usable second-hand goods.
Classified secret, US government property. And this will probably contain confidential information from the United States.
In Ghana, it's the dirty little secret of the high-tech industry. Do you know who has access to your recycled hard drive?
If somebody gets your hard drive, he can get every information about you.
So as you saw in this quick presentation, we were buying different hard drives on this e-waste dump in West Africa, also with the idea that we can find there maybe some information about the pre-owners, also to look at the illegal e-waste trade that is happening between Europe, the States, and Africa, where different things are labeled as second-hand electronics and then end up in these recycling junkyards, and where they just have to be dumped and cannot be recycled anymore. We brought back 22 hard drives from West Africa, and together with like a organization called Servus AT in Linz, which is an artist-run data center. We used different open source technology to access the data and to redistribute the data, the found footage that we found on these hard drives, to a group of artists that were then working on different installations and artistic videos reusing this data. So here are some photographs that you can see from the exhibition and the opening that we had, where we also placed a lot of e-waste in the exhibition space, just to show also how this e-waste becomes part of the architecture, the presentation of the artworks. Some of the works were also mounted on these e-waste containers or were hidden in the e-waste so that you had to find it in a way. Most of the works were dealing with the saving, the deleting, and the resurfacing of data. So here we also have a video that is showing the dismantling process of electronics in China and Indonesia, and then also like the final discarding of the electronics in West Africa. This was a research group meeting also from Switzerland. This is a work by a Berlin-based artist, Wolfgang Spahn, who was kind of looking at old like CD and DVD media, and to use like an image recognition to still sonify data that he found on there. And another artist, Michael Wirtig from Linz, he was microscoping the images from the hard drives, like the surface of the hard drives, and was documenting these scratches and the how broken these hard drives are and were partly not accessible anymore. He was making a video installation with this. Another work by Owen Mundy was featuring I Know Where Your Cat Lives. He was scraping images from Instagram from cats, and by looking at the metadata and analyzing the metadata, he could figure out the geolocation of each photo that was taken and could visualize it on an OpenStreetMap, so that you can see in which neighborhood are the cats around. And yeah, this is a work by Martin Reiche. He was making a work called Shell Performance, where he was using the hard drive as a performance space and then visualizing a script that is trying to open different file formats, trying to execute glitched videos, or also documenting these error messages that you can get when you open like data that is partly broken or not fully restored in a way. This is a work by Fabian Küfus, who was looking at the browser history, so the traces that we leave while browsing the internet, and was making film collages with the data that was looked at by the pre-owner in different shopping sites. And then this is from an artist from Switzerland, Raphael Perret. He was working with the second-hand recycling in India, was interviewing workers there, looking at their toxic working environments, and also making a video documentation and a photo series. And during the exhibition, we always had artist talks where people are talking about their works and making a guided tour so that others can also follow the research process and the design process. So I don't want to go through all of them, but this was also a work where that was highly informed by the open source movement and was shown at a festival called Art Meets Radical Openness that happens every 2 years in Linz in Austria. Okay, so moving forward, I would like to give a brief outlook to some of the tools that you're gonna get introduced over the next days and weeks to come. So there is on the one hand the MediaWiki, then the Hubs Mozilla, then the Open Broadcast Software and IoT, and the free GS to visualize 3D architectural models, and the CryptPad. So the MediaWiki, I'm sure you are all very aware of the Wikipedia, for example. MediaWiki is a very similar wiki that gives you the possibility to document and to report your projects. It's a very good platform for bringing the knowledge of a lot of different people together to administrate also the user rights. So as a student or as a person from a certain class, you can then get access to different folder structures, different pages where you are then actively documenting the studies and the projects that you are working on. And it's a very well maintained platform, can incorporate various different file formats, and also should act as a repository, not just to document your study process, but also for future students, so that they can see and learn from what you have been doing, creating, and documenting. Then there is the Hubs Mozilla, where I would like to start a video also that gives
Mozilla Hubs
an
is
overview
pretty
to
simple
it.
and also fun to use. I've
I
already
want to
gone ahead
turn
and
down the
navigated.
audio a bit because I don't need person talking about. So the Hubs is created by Mozilla, and you can create and share virtual rooms. And here we see one of these created landscapes. You can share these rooms with other students and with your teachers, and then meet in these virtual environments in order to discuss projects or also present your projects. So this is just a quick introduction to it. So if I jump a little bit further, here you see that you can navigate within these rooms by using the standard gaming layout of WASD for navigating to the front, to the back, to the left, to the right. And you can then also create different objects. There is a you can also make kind of a selfie of yourself, or incorporate different 3D objects either from the Google database, or you can also upload your own designs and objects that you have created. You can position them within this landscape and then also view them from different angles, different sides, and should act as a like a virtual 3D space where you can see your work. You can also incorporate videos and create something like a video war. So you can really create small exhibition rooms where you have a model and then a video and different media assets that you bring together in this environment. So for this, we also plan to make a workshop so that you get to know how to use these rooms, these virtual rooms, and to create a small setup with your models and your media assets in a way. Okay. And then the OBS, the Open Broadcast System, is in the end the software that I am using right now also to stream to you. It's a streaming and recording program that is very powerful and has a lot of features that you can stream in real time. You can also access various file formats, and you can record the whole streams also. and it incorporates streaming platforms such as YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, Facebook. In the end, it's possible to stream on all of these platforms at once. So quite an interesting and powerful tool to get to know also and to work with. Then there is the Internet of Things, where we also plan to have a workshop about. Not going to show this video because I'm sure that you are all aware of what the Internet of Things is. In the end, it's the connection of various objects that are not yet connected to the internet, but can be connected in the future. We thought that it could be a possibility to use the IoT also for presenting some of your works, maybe to attach some cameras or to make some cameras movable so that they can be also used by people who are looking at your models or things like this. And then there is FreeGS, which is a JavaScript database, where I quickly want to show you some videos in the background also. Maybe we don't need the sound for it. It's more to show you some of the functionalities. In the end, it's a JavaScript platform where you can show 3D renderings in the browser without the need to install a lot of extra programs or something. So all the rendering is done within the browser, depending on the models that you upload, all the functionalities that you need. Like here we saw that you can change different models or also through a color mixer have different colors of the car. There is a strong lighting and shading categories, so you can create very nice light situations and yeah, also very abstract forms, as you can see here. And in the end, these are not videos that are running, these are rendered 3D objects that I think can make it quite powerful to show different projects from you. Yeah, and last but not least, I wanted to also show you a brief video about the CryptPad. So CryptPad is an open source version of you can compare it maybe to a Google Drive. In the end, it's a cloud hosted platform where you can create documents, you can create presentations, you have the possibility to work with spreadsheets, and there are also options for creating whiteboards or kind of doodle collaboratively with your colleagues, especially now when it's hard to meet. Physically, it becomes even more important to have a platform where you can work collaboratively together. And CryptPad is a good open source version to do this. As it says, also, like, all the data gets encrypted. You can password protect it. You can invite different people and give them different rights. Maybe similar as some of you know from Google Drive or Google Docs. It's an open source version that is very powerful and works very well to have this collaborative working environment. Okay, so there are also some references in the presentation that you will have also available as a PDF. And in general, I would like to thank you for your time and for your interest. And I would be very happy to answer some questions or to discuss some things with you. We can use the chat function in the browser window to collect some questions, and maybe in the next minutes I will go through them. Thank you very much. Okay, yeah, by looking through the comments, I have to say I'm sorry that the sound was off at some points. It was hopefully not the most important parts that the sound has been missing. In general, I will also work on my setup here so that in the future you will have a better sound quality, especially with the videos also. Yeah, from Gustavo, I see the question how to use these sources in a Mac. Most of the programs are cross-platform, if not all of them. So you can use them on PC or Mac or on Linux. Not doesn't matter which operating system you have installed. So this should not be an issue, I think. Okay, so if there are no other questions for now, there should still be a possibility to get in touch with us through email. Send us your questions also. We will get to them also in the next lectures and workshops, answer to